History Inside a Nutshell, the show where we sail into our port of call discussing maritime history. The SS Nomadic, Titanic's tender ship cousin. Although her relation to the Titanic has been debated, it's accepted that the SS Nomadic was the Titanic's sister. However, some people believe she is known as the cousin of the RMS Titanic. Because of this, we are going to name the Nomadic as the cousin of the Titanic. But what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Returning to her story, the SS Nomadic is known as the tender ship for the Titanic and her older sister ship, the Olympic. A tender ship's use is to support other boats or ships by transporting passengers or goods from the shore or onto another ship. The Nomadic was no exception. In April 1912, she would have transported first and second class passengers, while the Titanic made her second port of call. The first and second class passengers she took towards Titanic include Margaret Brown, aka the unsinkable Molly Brown, the Astor family, and Benjamin Guggenheim. But her life and her nearly 6-decade career at sea are far more interesting than people realise. From serving the White Star Line to escaping a German invasion, this is the story of the SS Nomadic. Although her duties were in France, the Nomadic was a British tender. She was built in Belfast alongside the RMS Olympic and Titanic, which were built in the shipyard at Harlander Wharf. The Nomadic also shared the same designer. Thomas Andrews had been working at the Harlander Wharf shipyard for a long period. By the time of the Nomadic's construction, he had completed a premium apprenticeship at the shipyard and worked his way up the ladder to become managing director of the company and designed modern ocean liners and tender ships. When it came to designing her, Andrews had planned to build the Nomadic at 233 feet and 6 inches long and 37 feet and 2 inches wide. As a result, she had a gross tonnage of 1,273 and a maximum speed of 12 knots. She would have had room to carry 1,000 passengers, and like the Olympic and Titanic, she had segregated accommodations for first, second, and third class passengers. She also had 2 engines and was given 1 funnel. The SS Nomadic's keel was laid on the 22nd of December 1910, and she was nearby the Titanic. But unlike the 2 liners, the Nomadic took 4 months to build, mainly due to her size by 1/4. The Nomadic was launched on the 25th of April 1911, exactly 1 month before the launch of the Titanic. Upon her launch, she accompanied the Olympic during her sea trials before she sailed to Cherbourg. She would meet the Olympic again when the liner stopped at Cherbourg before continuing her maiden voyage to New York. In November 1911, the Nomadic was involved in a collision with the American Line's ship, the Philadelphia. As the result of the collision, the Nomadic damaged her bow. On the 10th of April 1912, the Nomadic received a telegram from the Titanic's wireless operator, Jack Phillips. Upon receiving it, the message said that the new liner had left Southampton and was on her way to Cherbourg. A little after 6 p.m, the Titanic arrived in Cherbourg and was moored in a deeper water off from the shore. Upon Titanic's arrival, the Nomadic transferred 274 first and second class passengers, their luggage, and the ship's stores from the shallow dockside. By the time of Titanic's arrival, the passengers on board the Nomadic and Nomadic's sister tender ship, the Traffic, had been waiting in rough, choppy seas for an hour. After waiting for the new ocean liner, passengers and people who have come to see her saw her funnels and flags before a 21-gun salute was fired from the military forts nearby. Just a few days later, the Titanic sank with a loss of over 1,500 people. Among the dead, there was Thomas Andrews. 2 years later, in 1914, the First World War broke out, and during this time, the Nomadic had been appointed to a role as a minesweeper. After the First World War ended in 1918, the Nomadic transferred American soldiers to Brest. Following that, she returned to her duties for the White Star Line. In 1927, the Nomadic was sold by the International Mercantile Marine Company. Her new owners were the Cherbourg Transshipment Company. Despite this, she continued to operate with White Star ships. In the 1930s, 2 events hit the Nomadic, which was to limit her days as a tender ship. The first event was the completion of a new deep water berth at Cherbourg in 1932. Because of the new berth, this meant tender ships were no longer required. The second event was when the Great Depression hit. Struggling financially, the White Star decided to merge with Cunard, becoming the Cunard White Star Line. Once again, the Nomadic was sold to the Cherbourg Tow and Rescue Society, where she was renamed the Injure Mina. But for the sake of confusion in this video, we will continue to call the Nomadic by her original name. In September 1939, another world war had occurred, and in 1940, France was invaded by Nazi Germany. In June 1940, she took part in Operation Ariel. During the operation, the tender ship went on a desperate mission to evacuate over 140,000 soldiers and aircraft factory workers. For 4.5 hours, she managed to escape a German invasion by avoiding submarines underneath the water. She sailed across the channel from Cherbourg to Portsmouth successfully. Once she arrived in England, the Royal Navy requisitioned the Nomadic for transporting trainee soldiers. For the remainder of the war, she spent her time shuttling troops along the south coast, travelling from Southampton to the Isle of Wight. At the end of the Second World War, plans were made to have the Nomadic scrapped. However, luck was on her side again when the director of the Cherbourg Towage and Salvage Company saved her. After this, the Nomadic continued to carry out her duties as a tender ship, carrying passengers in Cherbourg. The ships she would serve were mostly from the Cunard line, and these included the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. In 1968, the Nomadic was sold for demolition. However, luck was on her side again as she was saved. Instead of demolition, she travelled to Paris, where, for 30 years, she was moored beside the Eiffel Tower. It was there that she became a restaurant boat and a party venue. During that time, her original funnel, engines, propeller shafts, and outer decks had been removed. In addition to this, her bulkheads were cut through. It was from this moment on that she was unseaworthy. In 1999, the Nomadic's commercial life had come to an abrupt end. Following her seizure by the Paris harbour authorities and safety regulations, the tender ship's aging hull, concealed leaks, wet rot, and no safe electric power put her in danger. Because of her condition at the time, she couldn't be transported to another location. However, between 2005 and 2006, while the Nomadic was languishing, local enthusiasts began a campaign to save her from scrap once more. Their attempts were successful, as a year later, the Department of Social Development bought the Nomadic for £171,320. Following the bid, the Nomadic was moved to a dry dock in Le Havre before returning to her hometown, Belfast, in 2009. When she began a long journey, the Nomadic came home with the assistance of a 500-ton crane, 3 tugs, and the fire service. Thanks to them, she had arrived at her final home, Hamilton Dock. It was back in Belfast that she was to oversee her restoration and conservation. During her process, the Belfast City Council, Belfast Harbour Commissioners, the Department of Social Development, Tourism Northern Ireland, and the National Lottery Fund donated money for the Nomadic's restoration. In 2011, after being refurbished, adding a replacement funnel, reinstating her interiors and ornate panelling, and reinstating the bridge deck, the Nomadic was brought back to her original self in the way Thomas Andrews would have wanted her to be. She was opened to the public in 2013 and continues to be a popular tourist attraction. On a personal note, I had the honour of visiting the SS Nomadic in April 2023. Although I had never appreciated the ship before my visit, my mind changed once I learnt about her history and connection to the Titanic. On the 14th of April at 11:40 p.m, my friend who accompanied me and I attended a short service on the Titanic slipway to remember the passengers and crew members who died in the sinking. When we left the slipways, we still lit our candles and made a slow vigil back to our hotel, passing the Nomadic. In the memory of the Titanic's sinking, the Nomadic's halo light, located above her funnel, shone a bright purple colour. It was something that I had never seen, but later I learnt that having the colour purple on board a ship is a mark of respect. It commemorates the memory of those who had passed away at sea. When we passed the Nomadic's poop deck, we blew our candles out, a fitting tribute to the ships and mostly to the man who built them, Thomas Andrews. Although she isn't remembered in the past, the Nomadic continues to fascinate a new generation of historians and ship enthusiasts. Her story and connection to the Titanic still holds a place in the heart of Belfast, where she was born and where she will still go on. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe for future videos. Until next time, this has been History Inside a Nutshell, departing from the dogs. Thank you so much for all of your support and enjoy the rest of your voyage.